Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone.
Police in LA are investigating a bizarre and deeply disturbing case this week after the body of a woman was found inside a car registered to a rising New York musician and singer known as David. The whole thing began on Monday, September 8th, when workers at a Hollywood tow yard on North Mansfield Avenue noticed a foul stench coming from a Tesla that had recently been impounded. They contacted police, who quickly discovered that the odor was coming from the vehicle's front trunk. When detectives opened it, they made a chilling discovery. Inside was the dismembered and decomposing body of a woman sealed in a bag. Authorities say that she was wearing a tube top, black leggings, stud earrings, and a yellow bracelet, and that she had a distinctive "shh" tattoo on one of her fingers. The Los Angeles Medical Examiner's Office added that she was around 5'2" with black wavy hair. Though investigators are treating the case as a homicide, right now the female victim's identity has not been confirmed. Officials say that may take some time, given how badly decomposed the remains were after spending days in the California heat. For his part, 20-year-old David, whose real name is David Anthony Burke, has not been named as a suspect. His representatives have said that he is fully cooperating with authorities. In fact, at the time that his Tesla was abandoned in Los Angeles, he was performing in Ohio and continuing with his world tour. The vehicle, which carried Texas plates, had reportedly been sitting in the Hollywood Hills for nearly 5 days before being towed. As the case has unfolded, many of David's fans were concerned that he would cancel his remaining 40 tour dates, which include appearances at major festivals like Lollapalooza next year. However, despite the shocking discovery, Burke took to the stage in Minneapolis on Tuesday night as scheduled, telling followers on Instagram that he intends to keep performing. For now, investigators are continuing to piece together how the unidentified woman ended up inside the Tesla, and whether her death has any connection to the singer. At the time of this recording, the case remains active.
A 16-year-old boy allegedly opened fire at a high school outside Denver this week, leaving 2 students critically wounded before turning the gun on himself. Authorities have identified the shooter as Desmond Hawley, a student who, according to investigators, had been active in extremist corners of the internet for months. Officials claim Hawley was fascinated with past school shootings, including Columbine, and posted neo-Nazi symbols and violent imagery on social media in the days leading up to the attack. The shooting unfolded Wednesday, September 10th, at Evergreen High School in Jefferson County, the same county where the Columbine massacre took place 25 years earlier. According to police, Hawley entered the school armed with a gun and ammunition. He managed to shoot 2 students before secured doors prevented him from reaching areas where others were sheltering. More than 100 officers responded to the scene, and they found Hawley within 5 minutes. He had already turned his weapon on himself by this point and later died of his injuries. The 2 victims, including 18-year-old Matthew Silverstone, remain hospitalized in critical condition. Authorities have not said whether Hawley targeted them specifically or if they were chosen at random. The Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism reports that Hawley had been posting since last December on a gore forum where users share videos of violence mixed with extremist propaganda. In one post days before the attack, Hawley posed in the same way as the Wisconsin school shooter who killed 2 people last year. According to investigators, he even made a t-shirt styled after clothing worn during the Columbine shooting. On the morning of the attack, he posted a photo of himself holding a gun and a box of ammunition. Experts say his online activity shows a troubling pattern of what has been referred to as shooter tributes, where new attackers reference and glorify previous killers. Speaking about the incident, ADL Senior Vice President of Counter-Extremism, Orem stated, quote, "There is a through line between those attacks." Hawley's TikTok accounts, which included white supremacist slogans, were banned after the shooting, but investigators are still looking into how much encouragement he received from extremist communities online. The attack happened the same day that conservative activist Charlie Kirk was killed during a separate shooting at an event in Utah, though it received far less media coverage. We're going to get to that incident in a few minutes, though it's worth pointing out here that both of these crimes appear to have links to deep internet subcultures. For now, Jefferson County officials are urging vigilance and calling for stronger prevention programs. Still, it's important to point out that in this case, effective lockdown procedures and a swift police response greatly reduced what could have easily been a far greater tragedy.
Police in suburban Houston are investigating a heartbreaking and suspicious death this week after a Marine Corps veteran was found shot to death on the side of the road. The case began on Thursday night, September 4th, when deputies from Harris County Sheriff's Office were called to reports of a possible hit-and-run accident about 25 miles north of downtown Houston. It was just after 11 p.m. when they arrived to find the body of 28-year-old Jake Wynn. At first, investigators thought Jake had been struck and killed by a passing vehicle, but that theory quickly changed. Upon closer inspection, deputies realized that Jake had actually suffered a gunshot wound. His death was immediately reclassified as a homicide. Investigators now believe he may have been shot while inside a vehicle that later crashed near a nearby apartment complex, leaving visible tire marks in the grass. Detectives say it's possible Jake's body was dragged to the spot where it was found, and the suspect or suspects then fled in the vehicle. Jake's family said that on the night of his death, he had been working as an Uber driver to help support his mother and younger sisters. His older brother Matthew told local media that Jake had dropped off a customer downtown and still had passengers in the car when Uber last received updates from him. Hours later, his family received the devastating news. Jake, who was the second oldest of 5 children, had served honorably in the Marine Corps before returning home to Houston, where his family had immigrated from Vietnam. After leaving the military, he focused on caring for his mother and sisters while studying to become an EMT. His loved ones say he was the type of person who always came through when needed, describing him as easygoing, loyal, and selfless. In a GoFundMe campaign set up to help cover funeral expenses, Jake's relatives wrote that they would remember him as a hero whose, quote, quiet but ventureful nature touched everyone who knew him. As of the time of this recording, the fundraiser has brought in more than $49,000 in donations. The Department of Veterans Affairs has agreed to cover some of his burial costs, while Uber released a statement calling the case a devastating tragedy, adding that they are fully cooperating with investigators. Meanwhile, the Harris County Sheriff's Office continues to search for answers. Detectives are working to confirm where Jake was killed and whether the crime was random or targeted. They've urged anyone with information to contact investigators or Crime Stoppers. A $5,000 reward is being offered, and authorities have suggested that whoever is responsible could face capital murder charges. At the time of this recording, no suspects have been identified, and the case remains open.
A horrifying and deeply upsetting case unfolded in New York City this week after an elderly married couple was brutally murdered inside their own home in what police say was a random attack. It began on Monday, September 8th in the quiet Belrose neighborhood of Queens, just a couple miles from Belmont Park. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, fire crews were called to the home of 76-year-old Frank and 77-year-old Maureen Olton after their ADT home alarm system alerted their son, who works as an EMT with the New York Fire Department. However, what first looked like a house fire quickly revealed something far worse. Inside, firefighters and police found the Oltons dead in what investigators have described as a sadistic double murder. Frank had been tied to a pole in the basement and stabbed multiple times. His body had also been set on fire. Maureen, who used a wheelchair, was discovered upstairs. She had suffered burns so severe her body was almost unrecognizable. Prosecutors later revealed that she was still alive when the blaze was set, with soot found in her airway and a lung, as well as injuries consistent with strangulation. Investigators say the person responsible is 42-year-old Jamel McGriff, a career criminal whose rap sheet stretches back decades. Surveillance footage allegedly shows McGriff in the neighborhood that morning approaching homes under the pretense of needing to charge his phone. While some residents turned him away, he eventually targeted Frank Olton, who was outside working on his car. At first, Frank also refused him entry, but new video shows McGriff forcing his way through the back door. For the next 5 hours, McGriff allegedly committed unspeakable acts of violence on the couple inside their own home before setting it ablaze and walking out with 2 bags. Minutes later, flames could be seen tearing through the residence. About 60 firefighters battled the blaze for under an hour, but the damage was already done. What makes the case even more shocking is what happened afterwards. Investigators say McGriff went on a shopping spree with the Oltons' belongings, pawning 2 of their phones in the Bronx, spending $500 on clothing at Macy's, and even registering a rewards card in his own name. Surveillance also showed him using their credit cards to buy a movie ticket at a Regal theater, where he watched an animated religious film before heading to Times Square. Police were able to track him using those purchases, and by Wednesday evening, sharp-eyed officers spotted him in Midtown Manhattan. He was arrested near Times Square just after 5:30 p.m. When confronted, McGriff allegedly admitted to the murders, telling police, quote, "I killed them. I burnt them." Prosecutors say he made additional disturbing claims that were captured on body camera footage. This was far from McGriff's first violent crime. Back in 2006, he served a 16-year prison sentence for robbery. Since his release, he's been accused in at least 2 other robberies in Manhattan, including one at a GameStop store and another at a Verizon store where he was caught carrying what appeared to be a fake gun. He also failed to register as a sex offender last year, a violation of his parole. For the Olthans' neighbors, the attack was almost beyond comprehension. Frank had lived in the home for 4 decades and was known locally as a passionate Yankees fan. One neighbor told reporters, quote, "That was our conversation. The Yankees was always conversation. It sucks, man. You hear about this stuff happening in other neighborhoods, but when it happens right across the street from you, it's not cool." At the time of this recording, McGriff remains in custody, facing numerous charges, including murder, kidnapping, burglary, robbery, grand larceny, and arson.
Authorities in Alabama say a convicted felon is back behind bars this week after allegedly murdering a retired Auburn University professor while she was out walking her dog. The case began on Saturday, September 6th, when police were called to Kiesel Park in the city of Auburn. The large green space includes a 2-mile walking trail, and it's a place where locals often bring their pets. Tragically, this time officers arrived to find the body of 59-year-old Dr. Julie Gard Schmuel. Her dog was discovered nearby, unharmed. Investigators say Julie had been ambushed while on her walk, then dragged several hundred feet into a wooded area where she was stabbed to death. Police later revealed she had been attacked with a sharp object, and the county coroner confirmed that her injuries were consistent with trauma from a knife. Just 1 day later, officers announced they had made an arrest. The suspect, 28-year-old Harold Rashad Dabney III of Montgomery, was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of capital murder, one for robbery and another for kidnapping. Police say that after killing Julie, Dabney stole her Ford F-150 pickup truck to flee the scene. He was later tracked down and arrested, with evidence directly tying him to the crime. This isn't the first time Dabney has had a run-in with the law. In 2023, he was arrested in Virginia Beach after police found him drunk and asleep in his car with a sawed-off shotgun, a handgun with the serial number removed, and a bottle of pills. Though he was initially charged with serious firearm offenses that could have landed him years in prison, prosecutors later dropped the felony count. Instead, Dabney ended up pleading guilty to several misdemeanors, receiving a suspended sentence and probation. Had that earlier case turned out differently, it's possible he still would have been behind bars at the time of Julie's murder. For the Auburn community, the loss has been devastating. Julie was a professor emerita at the university's College of Veterinary Medicine, where she had worked since 2003. She retired in 2021 but continues to be remembered as a beloved teacher, mentor, and researcher. Auburn University released a statement calling her a cherished educator whose legacy will inspire future veterinarians for years to come. Former students also spoke about her kindness and energy, remembering how she was always ready to joke but never hesitated to stand up for others. At the time of this recording, her alleged killer remains in the Lee County Jail without bond.
A bizarre and deeply unsettling case out of Texas took another turn this month after investigators say a so-called butt dial exposed a plot to cover up the murder of a flight attendant. The story centers around 47-year-old Reina Nofal Soluri, a Fort Worth woman who worked for Envoy Air, a subsidiary of American Airlines. Reina was last seen alive on March 19th, and her text messages suddenly stopped that same evening. For weeks, she didn't show up to work, and her coworkers grew concerned. Eventually, on June 11th, one of them reported her missing to police. Detectives soon focused on Reina's 66-year-old roommate, Dennis William Day. When questioned, Day claimed he hadn't seen her in months and had no idea where she was. But suspicion mounted after it was learned officers were called to his home in early May to tow Reina's car, a new Mazda she had purchased just a week before vanishing. On June 23rd, after securing a search warrant, police examined video surveillance from Day's property. It showed him on March 21st dragging what appeared to be a lifeless body from the house into the backyard. Faced with the evidence, Day allegedly confessed. He admitted that he and Reina had argued in his kitchen, and when she threatened to call 911 after recording his behavior, he panicked and strangled her with his bare hands. He then claimed he stuffed her body into a black trash bin, drove about 65 miles north to the town of Bowie, and threw her off a bridge. That's where 62-year-old Joni Thomas comes in. Prosecutors say Day called Thomas that night to help move the body. At first, Thomas denied having anything to do with it, but then investigators made a startling discovery. On Thomas's own phone, detectives recovered a voicemail that appeared to have been created by accident, a so-called butt dial. On the recording, a man and a woman can apparently be heard straining to lift something heavy. The male voice, believed to be Day, says phrases like, quote, "Hey, help me. Make sure the lid's on," and quote, "I'm sorry I got you messed up in this." Confronted with that evidence, Thomas changed her story, admitting that Day had used her truck to drive to Bowie. She claimed that she had fallen asleep for part of the ride and insisted she didn't know what he was doing when he stopped at the bridge. Investigators, however, allege that both Day and Thomas deliberately left their cell phones behind at his home that night in an attempt to create a false alibi. Day has since been charged with murder and is being held on a $200,000 bond. Thomas was arrested on August 26th and charged with tampering with evidence, though she has since been released on bond. Despite multiple searches of the area around Bowie, Raina's body has not been recovered. Investigators believe flooding may have carried her remains downstream, but they did recover her gun after Day led them to it. For Raina's loved ones, the ordeal has been agonizing. Her sister Nez told local media that the family is still clinging to impossible hopes. In her words, quote, "It's been torture. Every other day I keep dreaming or wishing. Maybe she bumped her head, had amnesia, something." At the time of this recording, Dennis Day remains in custody, awaiting his next court date, while Thomas is out on bond. Raina Saluri is still officially missing, but investigators say the evidence shows she was killed months ago.
Prosecutors in Los Angeles, California say they've charged a man this week with a string of chilling crimes, including the murders of 2 men he allegedly lured through dating apps and the brutal attempted killing of a third. The suspect is 34-year-old Rakeem Prowell of Inglewood. He was already on probation for burglary cases, but investigators now believe his crimes go much further, spanning murder, carjacking, assaults, and even a bizarre burglary spree where he used a rubber mask to disguise his identity. According to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, the first known case happened on July 20th, 2021. That's when 51-year-old Miguel King met up with Prowell after the two communicated on a dating app. Prosecutors say Prowell fatally shot King and then stole his car. It wasn't until August 14th, nearly a month later, that King's remains were discovered in the Angeles National Forest. 2 years later, on August 21st, 2023, a second victim, 53-year-old Robert Gutierrez, also agreed to meet with Prowell after talking online. 2 days later, his family reported him missing. His body has never been recovered, but investigators say they found Gutierrez's car inside Prowell's own garage when they arrested him last week. In February of this year, a third victim, 40-year-old Jordan Andrews, also connected with Prowell through the same app. Authorities say Andrews was tied up, beaten with a baseball bat, and robbed. He managed to escape, but Prowell allegedly chased him in a vehicle and ran him down, breaking his leg. Andrews survived, and his testimony helped prosecutors build a larger case. In announcing the charges, District Attorney Nathan Hochman said, quote, "Imagine the terror and horror these victims felt after being duped into believing they were meeting for one reason, only to face inexplicable violence." Prowell has now been charged with 2 counts of murder with the special circumstance of multiple killings, 1 count of attempted murder, 2 counts of carjacking, 2 counts of second-degree burglary, and 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon. If convicted, he faces life in prison without parole or even the death penalty. His bail has been set at $2 million. If all that wasn't disturbing enough, there's more. Between 2019 and 2021, Prowell was linked to as many as 30 burglaries across Los Angeles, where security footage captured him wearing a creepy latex mask that made him appear like a young white man. Police later found the mask during a traffic stop, and he was convicted in 2 of those burglaries. Right now, investigators have not said whether Prowell used the same disguise in the dating app cases. At the time of this recording, he remains in custody as the investigation continues, with police now working to see if there may be even more victims.
People across the United States have been left shaken by a chilling act of alleged political violence this week, after one of the country's most influential conservative activists was assassinated in broad daylight during one of his own events. The disturbing incident unfolded on September 10th when political activist Charlie Kirk was speaking at the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. Charlie, who was the co-founder of the incredibly successful and influential conservative student political organization Turning Point USA, had traveled to the school that day as part of a series of nationwide appearances called the American Comeback Tour. Utah Valley University was supposed to be just the first stop on that tour. This particular event was held outdoors in an area of the school called the Fountain Courtyard. Charlie's tent, where he was speaking from, was set up at the lowest part of that courtyard, at the base of some amphitheater-style seating. Shortly after 12 p.m. local time, Charlie entered the venue, where by this point a crowd of approximately 3,000 people had gathered. After briefly engaging with the attendees and throwing MAGA hats to several in the crowd, he started the event. It was set up so that members of the audience could line up to either debate Charlie or ask him questions. Tragically, it wasn't long before things descended into absolute chaos. At 12:23 p.m., as Charlie was in the middle of a debate about gun violence, specifically mass shootings carried out by transgender perpetrators, a single gunshot rang out in the courtyard. Charlie was struck in the neck and almost immediately slumped over in his chair. Moments later, screaming and shouting could be heard from all directions as those in attendance realized what they had just witnessed and began desperately scrambling to find cover and safety. At the same time, several members of Charlie's security team, as well as other bystanders, ran onto the stage. Within seconds, they had picked him up and carried him to an SUV, which rushed him to a local hospital. Given how many people were recording at the time of the incident, the whole horrifying sequence of events was captured on video from multiple different angles. That being said, we highly advise you not to seek that footage out, as it is incredibly upsetting and disturbing. By 2:40 p.m., again local time, President Trump had taken to his social media platform, Truth Social, announcing that Charlie Kirk was dead. And while law enforcement did not comment for some time, eventually the news was confirmed. As all of this was happening, the situation on the ground remained chaotic. Initially, it was reported by the university that a suspect was in custody, though it quickly became clear this was not the case. A man was detained, but it was discovered he was not the shooter. Unfortunately, this was only a sign of things to come. Shortly before 4:30 p.m., FBI Director Kash Patel announced for a second time that the suspected shooter was in custody, only for authorities to have to retract this once again. Not only that, as new information was released, it became clear that law enforcement did not know who they were looking for. However, thanks to the amount of recording that was happening at the scene by attendees, as well as the campus's own security cameras, that had changed by the following morning. Shortly before 10 a.m. Mountain Time, authorities released images taken from some of this footage that showed a young man dressed in dark clothing, sunglasses, and a baseball cap. Earlier that day, it was confirmed that the suspected murder weapon had been recovered, a bolt-action rifle, and later that evening, the FBI released more video, this time of the alleged shooter jumping off a rooftop and running away from the UVU campus just moments after firing the fatal shot. Finally, on September 12th, it was announced that the alleged shooter had been arrested. During a press conference that morning, he was identified as a 22-year-old Utah man named Tyler James Robinson. Based on the available evidence, it's now believed that Robinson arrived on the UVU campus just before 8:30 a.m. on the day of the shooting. After changing his clothes, he headed up to a spot on the top of a building about 200 yards away from the Turning Point USA event, positioning himself on the roof. He then allegedly carried out the assassination before fleeing the scene. At the time of this recording, much has been said about Robinson and his alleged motive for the crime. For days now, social media has been awash with rumors and speculation, much of it incorrect and highly polarizing. And unfortunately, as I alluded to before, it doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime soon. Because while the vast majority of people on both sides of the political aisle have condemned Charlie's murder and political violence of this kind more broadly, there is no shortage of those who are attempting to exploit the situation for political gain, mainly by cherry-picking examples of past incidents of violence and rhetoric and asserting that what happened here is either entirely the fault of the political left or the political right. Currently, more information has come out about Tyler Robinson, though despite this, his motives still remain largely unclear. Still, we're going to try and tell you as much as we can about what is known. Perhaps the most widely reported detail is that there were messages found written on some of the bullet casings recovered along with the alleged murder weapon. The message that by far has captured the most media attention was the one that said, quote, "Hey fascist, catch," accompanied by a series of arrows pointing in different directions. Another message contained the Italian words, "O bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao ciao." Many have insisted these messages mean that Robinson was a member of the far left, owing to the fact that the Italian words appear to reference an anti-fascist song popularized in Italy following the Second World War. However, the other messages are far less clear and appear to reference internet memes and culture. One bullet casing was inscribed with the words, quote, "Notice his bulge, OWO. What's this?" While another stated, quote, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." For those unfamiliar, OWO was originally a Japanese-inspired text emote used to resemble the face of a cat. However, these days, the letter combination, along with that phrase specifically, has come to be associated with the furry community. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, consider yourself lucky. Furries are people who have an affinity for animal characters with human characteristics. They will sometimes dress up in so-called fursuits, but there was also a heavy emphasis on animated avatars and cartoon drawings of these characters, often with heavily sexual connotations. And according to some of the most recent reporting, Robinson has been linked to an account on one of the most notorious furry websites called furaffinity.net. This information came on the heels of more reporting that Robinson was in a romantic relationship with his roommate, 22-year-old Lance Twiggs. The 22-year-old is not currently believed to have anything to do with the crime, and police say is cooperating with the investigation. But the fact that Twiggs identifies as transgender has led to further speculation that this might have been part of Robinson's motive for the killing. Still, for as much as some have seized on these details, others have pointed out that several of Robinson's meme references also coincide with another community, a group that calls themselves Groypers. These are people who are fans and followers of far-right influencer Nick Fuentes. Fuentes has notably been a harsh critic of Charlie Kirk's for years, insisting that his political takes are too moderate. Fuentes and his supporters are advocates for the United States to be a Christian theocracy, and in past years was known for calling for his followers to actively disrupt, heckle, and harass Charlie and other speakers at events. On top of this, the Groypers are also known for being heavily embedded in gaming communities and internet culture, and many have pointed out that some of the catchphrases that Robinson allegedly wrote on the bullet casings align more with Groyper memes than anything on the left. Other details that have caused speculation are the fact that Robinson was reportedly raised Mormon and came from a Christian family. It's also been revealed that he was not politically affiliated with either Democrats or Republicans and did not vote in the last election. Some of those who knew the alleged killer say he was a smart and quiet guy, though became far more political and radical over the pandemic. Our point for bringing all of this up isn't to point fingers, but to emphasize that the situation appears incredibly fuzzy and complicated right now, especially because everything Robinson has said and done appears to be steeped in layers of inscrutable irony and internet memes. So anyone who tells you they know 100% what happened here is lying to you. Here's what we do know, though. Charlie Kirk was a married father of two whose children will now have to grow up without their father. And this level of political violence that we're seeing right now in America and around the world is incredibly scary and dangerous. One thing that almost everyone seems to agree on, though, is that the FBI handling of the assassination was slow and unorganized. People from all over the political spectrum, including notable Trump supporters, have criticized the response, especially after FBI Director Kash Patel appeared to take credit for Robinson's arrest when it was reported that his own father had turned him in. Many are now calling for Patel's resignation. Of course, there's also the security at the event itself, which many attendees have since come out and claimed was sorely lacking. The specifics of that are still under investigation, though a number of people told reporters that security was so lax that essentially anyone could have gotten in. Right now, things remain incredibly charged and divisive politically, and the uncertainty around everything that has happened is not helping the situation. It appears that right now all we can do is hope that with more information being released, the collective temperature on all of this can be turned down. At the time of this recording, Tyler Robinson remains in custody. Though official charges are still pending, authorities have already suggested that they plan to pursue a death penalty case against him. Hey there. Before you take off, we'd just like to take a second and say that we really appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. Luke and I are so grateful for our incredible Crime Zone community, so thank you for being a part of it. If you want to help Crime Zone continue to grow, one of the easiest things you can do is leave a like on this video and consider subscribing. Be sure to hit that notification bell as well and select all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to support the channel, there are a couple of options. We've got a thriving community over on Patreon, where you can get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. Head over to patreon.com/crimezone to learn more and to meet some of the awesome people whose names are currently on screen. If that isn't your thing, we've also now launched channel memberships so you can join directly here on YouTube. Channel members get a lot of the same perks as on Patreon, including extra content, without the added hassle of having to go off-platform. Now, that being said, we know times are tough and that not everyone is able to support financially. Regardless of your situation though, we want you to know that we truly appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, and we hope to see you soon.